What's up, everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video. Today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 15. A really good week with a lot of really good games. And first, of course, we have to talk about Josh Allen. I definitely think that the MVP award is his, especially after this performance against the Detroit Lions. Accounted for over 430 total yards of offense, 4 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 2 passing. Also saw the performance that he had in the previous week in Week 14 against the Los Angeles Rams. I've for the longest been saying that Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen should be the two favorites for this year's MVP, but I think Josh Allen solidified in that performance. I know that a lot of people are going to say Lamar Jackson too, because he put up 5 touchdowns in Week 15 as well, but that was against the Giants too, but not taking away from his success because he's had 34 passing touchdowns and only 3 interceptions throughout the entire season so far. So Lamar has been playing incredible this year too, but Josh Allen, he's just been phenomenal. And the Bills overall, we have to talk about them being the best team in AFC right now, especially after snapping the Detroit Lions winning streak. They won 11 games in a row. The last time they lost was in September, so like that's saying a lot right there. So that's one game that we have to talk about, the Bills and the Detroit Lions. Speaking of Saquon Barkley, the Philadelphia and the Eagles also beat the Steelers in convincing fashion as well too, looking dominant right now with the Lions loss. And of course the Lions are still really good, but they are dealing with a lot of injuries too, especially defensively. And you have to make the argument maybe that the Eagles are the best team in the NFC. And also saw the Packers beat the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football as well too, and that was a pretty dominant win. I know the Seahawks made a little comeback effort at the end, but also Geno Smith is hurt too and Sam Howell had to play, so there's a lot of questions about them. The Rams are now #1 in the NFC West too, and now with the Detroit Lions loss to the Buffalo Bills, the Minnesota Vikings have an opportunity to try and win a division, especially when they play against each other again soon. So it's just a lot of conversations to talk about from this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers also dominated the Los Angeles Chargers in a game that I thought would have been closer, but the Bucs look good too. So it's just a lot of games to talk about, man. This week was really good, and we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs right now as well. So with that being said though, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know what we post about here, videos about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, all types of videos, reels, shorts, interviews, player interviews, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 15. Go Cougs.
So this game on Thursday Night Football was definitely a snooze fest, a matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams ended up winning 12-6, and they essentially swept the San Francisco 49ers this season on the season series, and they now have an 8-6 record, and it's looking like the 49ers are going to miss the playoffs, which is crazy to say, especially going into the season, the expectations, making the Super Bowl, making the NFC Championship game 3 years in a row, but it's reality right now. And it's a combination of injuries and things of that nature, but really beyond the field because no touchdowns were scored in this game. I think the biggest storyline was Devondre Campbell essentially refusing to go in the game, and he refused. Of course, I know y'all know the backstory, but just explaining for the people who don't, that he was benched for Drake Greenlaw, who got hurt in the Super Bowl with the Achilles injury and had been out for 10 months, and it was his first game back against the Rams. He was playing well in the first half but had a little knee injury, and they asked Campbell to come in, but he refused to. And I understand because he had been the starter for the whole season and felt some type of way probably about that happening, but yeah, you just can't do that. You're quitting on the team, and the 49ers, it looks like they're trying to give him a suspension or something like that, but regardless, it looks bad because you're also auditioning for other teams because he's going to be a free agent after this year, and people aren't going to want a player or a teammate that quits on them. So that's a bad look there. But yeah, the Rams won this game, and they're looking poised to make the playoffs for sure again in another year when they're facing a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries, things like that, but still utilizing their weapons at a high level with Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp. So yeah, and their defenses look good as well. So it's a good win for the Los Angeles Rams. And I think people need to remember how elite of a coach that Sean McVay really is. So this game between the Washington Commanders and the New Orleans Saints was entertaining down the wire. The Saints had an opportunity to essentially win the game on a 2-point conversion, but the Commanders defense held up and they were able to win the game 20-19. It kind of would have been devastating though if you're a Commanders fan if they would have lost, because they had a 14-0 lead at one point in this game, so especially against the Saints, so you definitely wouldn't have wanted that on your resume. But yeah, the team collectively played pretty good. Jaden Daniels had a really good game, completed 25 out of his 31 passing attempts, efficient football, throwing for 226 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had 11 carries for 66 rushing yards. Brian Robertson Jr. also had 65 rushing yards, and then Terry McLaurin had 7 receptions for 73 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns too. So overall offensively they had a good game for the most part. Was a little bit more stagnant in the second half, but they were still able to do enough to win the game. And then on the flip side for the New Orleans Saints, they just had a revolving door of quarterbacks playing. I know Jake Hayner started, and then Spencer Rattler went into the game. Not really an efficient game at all. Only completed 10 out of his 21 passing attempts, threw for 135 passing yards and a touchdown. The running game really wasn't effective at all. Only had 65 rushing yards total. So yeah, but Alvin Kamara also had a receiving touchdown, so that helps. But ultimately it wasn't enough, and we know that this season has been lost loss for the most part for the Saints since week 2, because everyone thought they were Super Bowl contenders after the first 2 weeks of the season. But yeah, it's a entire 18-week season, 17-game season, so that's what it is with the Commanders. They won, and they are poisoning themselves to have a NFC wildcard playoff berth, having a 9-5 record right now. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Cleveland Browns, winning 21-7, moving on to a 13-1 record, still having a number 1 seed. But beyond the actual game, and of course Patrick Mahomes had a solid performance, but not too impressive because he only completed 19 out of his 38 passing attempts, threw for 2 touchdowns and only 159 passing yards. But really the biggest storyline is that high ankle sprain injury that he suffered, and now his status is week to week. And if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, you should sideline him on the game on Saturday against the Texans. Yes, you want to win the game and retain the number 1 seed, but ultimately to have the best chance to go and be the first team in Super Bowl era to win 3 straight Super Bowls and have a three-peat, you have to have Patrick Mahomes in the lineup, because if you don't have him in the postseason, you're cooked regardless. So that's the reality of the situation. So in my opinion, you rest him against the Texans, maybe even on Christmas Day against the Steelers, and that's going to be a hard conversation because we know how competitive Patrick Mahomes is, but you want him for the postseason to be as healthy as possible. It's not about playing in the regular season right now, especially when you already have 13 wins going into week 16 as well already. But in terms of that, another injury on the other side, the Cleveland Browns with Nick Chubb suffered a foot injury and is out for the season. It just sucks, man, because he had that devastating knee injury in the 2023 season and now this as well too. One of the most hardworking players and athletes that we've seen playing in the NFL, and it just sucks. But yeah, that's just been a nutshell of the Browns season. Jameis Winston didn't have a good game at all. He threw 3 interceptions. Even Dorian Thompson-Robinson had to come in, so it was just bad. But the team overall threw 4 interceptions because DTR threw one as well. But yeah, man. But like I said, for the Chiefs, I think you rest Patrick Mahomes on Saturday against the Texans. That's just my opinion. But they got the win here, and they still have the number 1 seed in the AFC. This game was interesting to say the least. The Cincinnati Bengals against the Tennessee Titans, and the Bengals won 37-27. Both of these teams are most likely going to miss the playoffs, but there was a lot of interceptions in this game, and we can talk about Joe Burrow real quick. He didn't play nearly as bad as the Titans quarterbacks, especially Will Levis, which we'll talk about in a second, but it wasn't the most impressive performance, but they got the job done. Joe completed 26 out of his 37 passing attempts for 271 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and those 2 interceptions. Chase Brown had 25 carries for 97 rushing yards and a touchdown, and Jamar Chase had 9 receptions for 94 receiving yards, and T. Higgins had 5 receptions for 88 receiving yards and a touchdown. So a good performance from them offensively overall. Their defense actually showed up and played pretty good. Like I talked about, mentioning Will Levis, we can talk about him. The defense for the Bengals, they turned over Will Levis 3 times, and Levis ended up getting benched. But not only did they turn over Will Levis, they turned over Mason Rudolph as well, because Mason Rudolph, he didn't play bad. He completed 21 out of 26 passing attempts, threw for 2 touchdowns and 209 passing yards, but he also threw an interception as well too. So the defense for the Bengals, they forced 4 total interceptions, so they should be happy from their performance from that standpoint, and also against the Cowboys for the most part too. I mean, there were drives last week when I felt like the Cowboys were driving down with ease with Cooper Rush, but hey, a win is a win, and they got another win, 2 wins in a row for this Bengals team, that if they go 9-8, maybe they might have an outside chance to try to get the 7th seed, but I really doubt it, to be honest with you. And they have a lot of reinforcements that they'll need to add in the offseason, but at least they got a couple of wins down the stretch here, and they beat the Titans, who look awful, absolutely awful. Neither of these teams has really been impressive lately, but the Houston Texans beat the Miami Dolphins, winning 20-12. I say that in terms of the Dolphins perspective because they've gotten some wins, yes, but also when they play against teams that are over 500 or better, they don't look impressive at all, and that's the same case in this game against the Houston Texans. First and foremost, Tua freaking Tagovailoa had been playing great since he returned from his injury, and in this game it was a dud. He ended up throwing 3 interceptions, 2 to Derek Stingley as well. That might have just cooked their playoff chances. Actually, I think it did, to be honest with you. They now have a 6-8 record, and even if they win out, it's going to look tough. It would have been better for them to go 10-7 and 9-8, and it's going to be hard for them to make the playoffs. Their best skill player in this game was for sure Johnny Smith, and arguably he's been the best skill player for them for the past 5 to 6 weeks, as he had a receiving touchdown as well. But not impressive at all from their offense, and really from the Texans either. The Texans, in my opinion, they've been great defensively the entire year, but offensively, there's been a lot to be desired, and I think all Texans fans can attest to that. In this game, CJ Stroud, he did complete 18 out of his 26 passing attempts, but only for 131 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, so that's nothing crazy. Also, Joe Mixon went out in the game, so hoping he's able to be okay. But even receiving wise, yes, there was balance in terms of a lot of people getting receptions, but Joe Mixon had the most receiving yards, 5 receptions for 33 receiving yards. So yeah, there's a lot of questions for the Texans, and in my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if their first round exits, but they clinched the AFC South in a division that hasn't been impressive at all, and of course with the Colts losing to the Broncos, that's how they were able to clinch it, and also with the win. But yeah, the Texans won the game, but neither of these teams have necessarily been impressive, and we'll see how the Texans do in the postseason for sure. I believe the Baltimore Ravens were 16.5-point favorites going into this game, and rightfully so, and the Baltimore Ravens dominated the New York Giants, winning 35-14, moving on to a 9-5 record. And I mentioned in the intro, Lamar Jackson had a great game. He's only lost 1 game in his whole career against an NFC team, and ironically it was against the Giants, but not this time at all. And in this game, he completed 21 out of his 25 passing attempts, threw for 290 passing yards, and had 5 passing touchdowns. Rushing wise, he also had 65 rushing yards, but he was able to spread the ball out through to Rashad Bateman, who had 80 receiving yards on 3 receptions for 2 touchdowns. Justice Hill had 61 yards on 5 5 receptions for a receiving touchdown. Mark Andrews also had a receiving touchdown, and Devontae Walker too. So like I said, a lot of balance and a lot of dominance from that team, and defensively they were able to play better in this game too against the Giants. That's not surprising, but they have looked better recently. Tommy DeVito and Tim Boyle played in this game, and Tim Boyle threw an interception as well too. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about from the Giants perspective. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I'm not about to spend time talking about this team when we know how horrid they are as an organization overall. They need a lot of reconstruction. Are they gonna fire Brian Daboll? I guess we'll see in due time, but they just need a lot of reconstruction because both New York teams are bad, the Giants and the Jets. But yeah, the Baltimore Ravens, they got a good win. It'll be interesting to see on Saturday if they're able to beat the Steelers, because if they do, they'll be positioning themselves to potentially try to win the AFC North and take it back. But that'll be a good matchup. We'll see about that because Lamar Jackson didn't play the greatest in that game. But yeah, they look good in this one and they dominated by a huge margin. Speaking of the other New York team, the Jets did beat the Jaguars, winning 32-25 for their whopping 4th win of the season. Yay. But anyways, though, I mean, it was a good performance from them, especially defensively as well too. Sauce Gardner had essentially a walk-off interception to steal the game. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers, he had a good game, completed 16 out of his 30 passing attempts for 289 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Breece Hall had a rushing touchdown in his return back. But one person to talk about as well, this is what you brought him in for, at least in terms of the team overall, and I know they're not playing for much, but Devontae freaking Adams, he had him a game, had 9 receptions for 198 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Went off. Also, Garrett Wilson had a receiving touchdown. So that was impressive, especially from Devontae Adams. So if there's any consolation for this season, it's for the Jets to kind of try to finish off strong. But like I said about the Giants, there's going to be a lot of reconstruction with their roster as well too, and most likely they won't bring back Aaron Rodgers in a lot of pieces, but only time will tell with that. And for the Jaguars, I mean, Mac Jones didn't play bad. He completed 31 of his 46 passing attempts, throwing for 294 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, but also 2 picks, and like I said, that walk-off interception for Sauce Gardner. But like I said about the Jaguars in previous weeks, Brian Thomas Jr., their rookie wide receiver, has been exceptional this year and really their only bright spot. Had 10 receptions for 105 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So yeah, these teams aren't great. Someone had to win and the Jets did, and yeah, that's what happened. So I know the Cowboys have been bad this year, and there's no question, if you know me and know my channel, they're my favorite team, and I'm very unbiased towards them in terms of how I talk about them, because you have to be real. But let's be real, guys. Y'all know they aren't Carolina Panthers bad. The Panthers were actually favored going into this game too, so I thought that was pretty disrespectful. And yeah, we saw the Dallas Cowboys really dominate them for the most part. It was a little hesitation going into halftime because Cooper Rush had that fumble, and then Bryce Young threw an 83-yard touchdown to Jalen Coker. But besides that, the Cowboys dominated, especially their defense, forcing Bryce Young to throw 2 interceptions and having 2 forced fumbles. So that's an encouraging thing if you're a Cowboys fan, just going into next season and what you can build on, because you don't necessarily know if they're going to have the same coaching staff too. So there's a lot of questions there, but the defense did look good against the Panthers. Offensively, besides Cooper Rush having that fumble, they weren't really too bad. Cooper Rush completed 18 out of 29 passing attempts, threw for 214 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Rico Dowdle has been playing great. I believe 3 straight games with over 100 rushing yards. He's the first undrafted player to do that since Arian Foster with the Houston Texans. Had 25 carries for 149 rushing yards, absolutely bludgeoning the Panthers defense. CeeDee Lamb also had a good game, 9 receptions for 116 receiving yards and a touchdown. So yeah, the Cowboys at this point, they're just trying to finish off strong. As a fan, I want them to draft Ashton Genty super bad and just really fill out that team. And I know Jerry Jones does everything that doesn't make sense usually, but if he wants to really go all in for next season when Dak comes back and all those players, try to be at least a little aggressive in free agency. Try to restructure some contracts and bring some people in. But yeah, that makes too much sense for Jerry Jones. But anyways, the Cowboys did win this game. This game really surprised me, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers dominated the Los Angeles Chargers, winning 40-17. Baker Mayfield had a phenomenal game, and same with Mike Evans, who's of course the future first ballot Hall of Famer. But talking about Baker first and then going into all the other stats, because in the running game they played great too. Baker Mayfield completed 22 out of his 27 passing attempts for 288 passing yards, 4 touchdowns and only 1 pick. Rushing wise, Bucky Irvin had 15 carries for 117 rushing yards. Rashad White also added in, having 15 carries for 64 rushing yards too. And then receiving wise, Mike Evans had 9 receptions for 159 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen McMillan had 5 receptions for 75 receiving yards and a touchdown. Then Rashad White also had a receiving touchdown himself too. So this team was dominant, and I'm really surprised from the Chargers perspective, because their defense has been one of their strong suits throughout the entire year, which has led them to be so successful. But in this game, there was a lot to be desired. Offensively as well, there was no running attack at all. Of course, with J.K. Dobbins out, we kind of knew that, but they only had 32 rushing yards total. Justin Herbert only threw for 195 passing yards, completing 21 out of his 33 passing attempts for 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. So yeah, it was just a tough game for the Chargers, and both of these teams are now 8-6. Buccaneers are right now leading in the NFC South in their division, so they really just took it away from the Falcons despite losing both head-to-head matchups. So it's really been a persevering effort from the Bucs so far this year, especially losing Chris Godwin. But yeah, this team has looked really good in the past month and change. And for the Chargers, they still have a good shot to make the playoffs in the AFC, but they can't slip too much, man. But yeah, it was a really dominant and good performance from Tampa Bay. This game essentially eliminated the Indianapolis Colts from playoff contention as the Denver Broncos dominated them, winning 31-13. There was just a lot of mistakes from the Colts, from Jonathan Taylor having a touchback touchdown instead of breaking the plane with the ball and dropping it before breaking the pylon, that was tough. To Anthony Richardson throwing for 0 touchdowns, only completing 17 out of his 38 passing attempts and throwing 2 interceptions. It's just been tough for the Colts this year. From starting with Anthony Richardson to him tapping out to putting Joe Flacco in to going back to Anthony Richardson, it's just been an up and down, slippery slope and roller coaster if you're an Indianapolis Colts fan. So that's tough from their perspective. At least AR had a rushing touchdown, but still, there was just a lot to be desired from this team, and they have not looked good. And especially in this game, they didn't. But the Denver Broncos have been one of the most surprisingly, sneakingly good teams of this season, and that continued to follow suit, particularly with their defense, because their defense has dominated games throughout the entire year, because their offense did not really play good at all in this game, especially Bo Nix. Yes, he threw for 3 touchdowns and completed 20 out of his 33 passing attempts, but he only threw for 130 passing yards and also threw 3 picks as well too. So it wasn't a good performance at all, but they were still able to withstand that. And like I said, their defense really carried and played well. And Cortland Sutton also had a receiving touchdown. Trotman had a receiving touchdown, and so did Nate Atkins. So Broncos were able to pull this out. They're now 9-5 on the season, and they're positioning themselves to make the playoffs and be a wild card. But the Colts, their season is really over. The Arizona Cardinals still have a shot to make the playoffs, and they won this game against the Patriots, winning 30-17, moving on to a 500 record of 7-7. And although Kyler Murray didn't throw any passing touchdowns in this game, he played pretty good overall. He completed 23 out of his 30 passing attempts, throwing for 224 passing yards as well. James Conner had a really dominant game, had 16 carries for 110 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns as well too. Trey McBride, like I continue to say, has been one of the most underrated and best tight ends this season. Had 9 receptions for 87 receiving yards. Fantasy-wise, I wish they would get Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball way more, but anyways, with that, they got the win still. And for the Patriots, man, we just know that this team really isn't as talented as they should be. They do have their future franchise quarterback though, and Drake May, who didn't have the greatest performance, but he was efficient in terms of his completion percentage. Completed 19 out of his 23 passing attempts for 202 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. This team, I believe, if they draft Travis Hunter and get a lot of talent in free agency and throughout the draft, they could be way better. They could potentially win anywhere from 6 to 9 games maybe next year. But this year, we know what the situation is. They just aren't really talented, and Gerard Mayo, being a rookie head coach, is still trying to figure things out, but I believe he has a lot of potential, and he has that Patriots DNA, being a former player there as well too. So there's a lot of encouragement there. But yeah, the Cardinals won this game, and they're still trying to make a push for the playoffs in the NFC. This is the game that I previewed in the intro. This is the game, in my opinion, which was game of the week for NFL Week 15, and it lived up to it as the Buffalo Bills beat the Detroit Lions, winning 48-42, moving on to an 11-3 record. And like I said, in my opinion, Josh Allen, he's the MVP, man. Completed 23 out of his 34 passing attempts, threw for 362 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And also on the running game, he had 11 carries for 68 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. But even beyond that, bro, at halftime, Josh Allen had 254 passing yards. That tells you enough right there, man. He was just dominated the game, looking surgical against that Detroit Lions defense, who, yes, I know they've been decimated because of injuries and things of that nature too, but this team has been regarded still, despite the injuries, as a Super Bowl contender. And their prayers for sure for the Lions, because now David Montgomery might be out for the year. That's crazy, with an MCL injury. That sucks, man. This team has just been dealt with a lot of adversity in terms of injuries and things of that nature, and they still have a 12-2 record, but really, how much can you overcome, especially in the playoffs when you have that many injuries? But moving on to them offensively, they did have a good game. I mean, they started off slow though, because the Bills defense was dominating, but they were able to get things clicking. Jared Goff completed 38 out of his 59 passing attempts for 494 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had a rushing touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 14 receptions for 193 receiving yards and a touchdown. Tim Laporta had 7 receptions for 111 receiving yards. There was just a lot of offense. Jahmyr Gibbs also had a receiving touchdown. Jameson Williams, Tim Patrick. I mean, you can go down the line, but really, in my opinion though, like I said, Josh Allen, he stamped himself for MVP in this game. And the Lions, they still have a really good team, but when it was 35-14, I kind of knew what direction this game was going in. But yeah, the Bills got the win, and they look really dominant and dangerous right now. Another game that was kind of viewed as game of the week, the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles won this game 27-13. And in my opinion, of course, it was only a 2-possession score at the end of the game, but really the Eagles dominated throughout it all. And we can go through the stats real quick. Jalen Hurts had a better game. Of course, we know the issues that were reported, especially with Brandon Graham talking about, Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown's relationship. Well, in this game, they played good. Jalen Hurts completed 25 out of his 32 passing attempts, throwing for 290 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. AJ Brown had 8 receptions for 110 receiving yards and a touchdown. And also Devontae Smith had a really good game, 11 receptions for 109 receiving yards and a touchdown too. So Saquon Barkley really didn't have a great game, had 19 carries for 65 rushing yards, but Jalen Hurts had a rushing touchdown too. Of course, we know the tush push strategy, but hey, they were able to have their way against the Steelers defense, who was regarded regarded as one of the best in the NFL. So that's an encouraging thing if you're a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles and you're able to beat a really good team in the AFC who is now 10-4. Offensively, they were really stagnant in my opinion, especially from watching it. Russell Wilson completed 14 out of his 22 passing attempts, but only for 128 passing yards and a touchdown. Rushing wise, they had nothing going. Only had 56 rushing yards total. Of course, receiving wise, you still have George Pickens out, your number one wide receiver, so not necessarily a lot of weapons too. And I think it's safe to say not a lot of teams fear the Steelers offense, and that's just reality. But yeah, Freiermuth had a touchdown, but man, it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers do in the postseason, and hopefully they can get George Pickens back as soon as possible. But like I said, the Eagles right now, you might have to put them number one in the NFC, especially after the Lions lost, but that's a question mark. But I understand still if you have the Lions as the best team, but like I said, they have a lot of injuries. But yeah, the Eagles got the win. The Green Bay Packers dominated the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday Night Football, winning 30-13, moving on to a 10-4 record. And now the Seattle Seahawks, who were number one in the NFC West, lost this game, and now they are number two in the NFC West, as now the Rams have upped them in their division. So that was a monumental game, and especially how things finish out too for the Seahawks. But the Packers, they continue to be one of the best teams in the league, especially in the NFC sneakily, and they're going to sneak up on somebody, especially if they don't win the division, which they most likely won't, with the Lions and Vikings having the success that they have had in the NFC North. But teams definitely do not want to see the Packers in the playoffs, and that's facts. Just like last season, but in my opinion, they're even better this year. Jordan Love completed 20 out of his 27 passing attempts, throwing for 229 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. Josh Jacobs, yes, he had a fumble, but he dominated, having 94 rushing yards and 1 touchdown on 26 carries. Jordan Love also had an impressive throw to Christian Watson in the game too in the second quarter, and then Romeo Doubs had 3 receptions for 40 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. This team is young, energetic, and ready, playing well offensively and defensively. We know Matt LaFleur, how he's been a great coach for them in his 6 years as a head coach. They've only missed the playoffs once in the 2022 season. He calls the plays. Jeff Hafley, first-year defensive coordinator, has looked really good for their defense. That defense forced the Seattle Seahawks to throw an interception from Geno Smith and from Sam Howell as well too. So yeah, there's a lot to be desired in terms of the Seahawks, especially with Geno Smith out. We don't know how long he's going to be out yet, and hopefully it's not too long, because they're going to need him, especially if they're trying to make the postseason, because like I said, they were leading their division, but now they're not, and they need Kenneth Walker back too. Charbonnet, he had a touchdown too, but there's still a lot to be desired. JSN, he did have 10 receptions for 83 receiving yards, but yeah, man, the Green Bay Packers, they won this game, and like I said, teams in the NFC do not want to see them in the playoffs. That's facts. Now on to the Monday Night Football games between the Vikings and the Bears, and then also, of course, the Raiders and the Falcons. But first, getting into the Vikings against the Bears. The Vikings won this game pretty handily, winning 30-12. It wasn't really close for any parts of the game, to be honest with you. The Bears just continued to struggle, and really their season went downhill ever since that Hail Mary catch happened against the Commanders. It's tough, but it's true, and it happened. And the Vikings, they're just playing really good football, have a 12-2 record, and like I mentioned earlier, they have a real shot at taking the division away from the Detroit Lions. And in this game, they looked good offensively and defensively. Sam Darnold completed 24 out of his 30 passing attempts, threw for 231 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Aaron Jones had 86 rushing yards on 18 carries and a touchdown. Cam Akers also had a touchdown too. Justin Jefferson had 7 receptions for 73 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. So this team just had really good balance. They have been one of the best teams in the league, and it's going to be crazy to see who's a wild card. If it's the Vikings or the Lions, who wins the division, same thing, because with the Packers also there too. Just the whole division is insane, except for the Bears, who lost this game, and they've continued to struggle so much this year. It's tough. I wonder who the head coach is going to be there next year, but it's just hard watching them at times too, because all the talent that they have, but there's still so many holes in terms of their offensive line and things of that nature. Just a competency with the franchise. It really just seems like are one of those cursed franchises, but it really just takes a quarterback guru, in my opinion, that's going to help develop Caleb Williams to take that team to the next level. But yeah, the Vikings got to win, and like I said, they're one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Definitely a top 5 team in the NFL this year. They look way better than even the team that they were in 2022. Of course, that lost to the Giants in the first round, but I take this team as real potential legit Super Bowl contenders, especially with how Sam Darnold has played throughout this year, and Kevin O'Connell is doing an amazing job as head coach there, and a legit coaching of the year candidate for sure. This game was a hard watch, not gonna lie, but at least the Falcons were able to finally get a win, and Kirk Cousins finally threw his first passing touchdown since week 9. That's an insane stat, but he did throw another interception. But ultimately they won the game, winning 15-9. Not really gonna recap too much from this team, because we know what's up with the Raiders. They are one of the worst teams, along with the New York Giants and Jets and other teams of that nature, and they're trying to get Shedeur Sanders most likely. But the Falcons won this game, and they moved on to a 7-7 record. They're still behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by a game, so I'm not really sure if they're gonna make the playoffs or have a chance to win their division, but They finally got the win in this game.
So yeah, guys, before closing out the video and going to the outro, you know, every week I've been sharing my top 5 teams right now at this moment. And after week 15, I have to say right now, the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the league. Like I said, how they beat the Lions and just how Josh Allen is playing at an MVP level. At number 2, I'll probably say that the Eagles are the second best team in the NFL right now too. Just continuing to play consistent football, and they've been hot the past few months. So got to give them credit. Number 3, in my opinion, I still have the Lions. This is their first loss since September, guys. So let's just be real. And they lost to the Bills. So that's not a bad loss at all. And especially all the injuries that they've had defensively too, still only losing by 6 to the Bills. They still have a loaded roster and have enough for the most part to win the Super Bowl. So the Lions at number 3. At number 4, I had to put the Chiefs, although there's going to be a lot of questions of course with that Patrick Mahomes ankle injury, but still had to put them there. And at number 5, I had the Minnesota Vikings. Not a lot to be said there. No one saw the success that they've been having this year so far, but they've been playing at a high level, and we've continued to see that offensively and defensively week in and week out. So with that being said though, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below what y'all thought about NFL week 15. Week 16 is going to be really good because we're going to start getting those Saturday games, and then going into week 17, all the Christmas games, things of that nature. So yeah, it's a beautiful time, guys. Remember, Jesus is the reason for the season. Christmas time is here. So yeah, but appreciate y'all guys always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss. Also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for all types of content and videos, man. Like I said, Jesus is the reason for the season. You matter. You have purpose. No matter what you're going through in life, mentally, all types of hurdles that you may be going through, obstacles, you matter. And tough times don't last forever. Tough people do. And know that you have purpose. So y'all have a good one. Y'all be blessed. Stay tuned for more videos. I thank you for the support always. And y'all have a good one.